Hey folks, it's Wednesday, so once again I'm here covering the latest Tinto Talks for Project Caesar, aka EU5, and this week Johan's going to talk about the system that's going to replace technology levels and the national idea system in EU4, and while some aspects of the idea system are covered by the societal values and law system that they've brought into EU5, this new system that they're going to talk about today, which is advances, is going to cover all the other bits that kind of fall out of those systems not being in EU5 that aren't covered by these other ones. And we're going to start immediately with a screenshot, and it is of this new advances system. You can see here it is the Age of Renaissance. Scholarly treatises is the advance that they are currently researching. And you can see also from this screenshot, they are, as I said, already in the Age of Renaissance, but none of the institutions you can see on the left-hand side have been unlocked yet in this realm. I would imagine that top right icon with plus 1.35 is your research rate. There are 8 new reforms available, and there is currently between 20 and 500%. I think that is something to do with trade. Someone could correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe that is related to trade or marketplaces. Something to do with money. It's got money in front of a marketplace stall, so it must be something to do with those. Maybe trade power or something. We'll find out in the future. In the second half of the UI here, you can see the research tab and then the ages tab. And you can see, as it showed above, scholarly treatises is at 4.52%. And then it does actually list out all the other ones that are available. I believe we're going to get into that in a minute about how this kind of like tech tree works. But in this UI to begin with, you can see scholarly treatises is the top one. It does say research Q2. So it does look like you can kind of queue up researches at the beginning of an age maybe. And then you can just leave it to do its own thing, and it will just work through them. That would be pretty cool. I know some of the games that Paradox have done have had a similar system to this, because I'm sure many of us, especially once we get into the game and got a lot of experience, we're going to know exactly which ones we want to go for, and we can just queue them up in this way. So that is pretty cool. Although, as we will see later on, you can unlock additional research areas depending on what you do during these ages. So it is kind of not limited by that, but it is something to keep in mind. And as you can see as well from here, from the actual advances themselves, they are, as Johan said, kind of linked into these systems you will have seen in EU4. They give similar-ish bonuses, institution growth, literacy in nobles, that is obviously new, but a similar-ish thing you would see in EU4. And then the one they're researching at the moment, embrace institution cost minus 10% and revoke privilege cost minus 5%. So we have seen these, as Johan said, they're kind of picked out of these different systems that no longer exist and then put into this new system here, and you get to kind of choose which ones you want to do. And again, they're going to go into that in a second. But as Johan says here, what were different effects from the technology levels and ideas are now something they call advances, as we've been talking about. Advances can unlock new diplomacy, new units, new abilities for units, which is interesting, new character interactions, new subject interactions, new estate privileges, new laws, new policies in laws, new inheritance systems. You get the idea. It unlocks a bunch of things in many other systems. New cabinet actions, they've talked about that previously as well. So as you can see, this does affect everything pretty much all the way through the game. And Advance can also unlock mechanics like investing in stability, building roads, collecting taxes, and much, much more. Last but not least, Advances can also impact stats like your literacy for your nobles, or better military tactics. Again, that was one of the options we saw. At the start of each age, each country will get a new Advances tree, which will be unique to that country. A tree usually contains about 100 advances. Some of these are common, and some are more specific depending on who you are playing as. Each tree, except the Age of Tradition, as that is the first one, has 4 different starting points, a common one, and one for each institution. The ones from institutions tend to unlock relevant advances to that institution. So as we can see from here, you are going to get a mostly, I'm not going to say generic tree, but most of the tree is going to be very similar depending on where you're playing in most respects. But as we will see later on, there are unlocks based on culture, tags, what institutions you have, your religion, and things like that. So it isn't super generic. If you played something like Hoi 4 or even Imperator Rome, you will see similarities to that system, especially with how the UI looks at the moment. If you've played either of those games, it looks very similar to how theirs works. So if you want to like visualize it, well, you don't have to go to those games. You can actually see here. This is the visualization of the advances on a different UI. So not the list we've seen before. I believe that's probably just like the default ones it will pick if you don't choose any yourself, maybe. But as we discussed, you can queue them up by the looks of it. And as you can see from this UI, they are grouped together, as Johan was saying. So there's shipbuilding, and then that unlocks trade fairs, traditional galley, then unlocks hulks. And then you can see also the other ones. So there's agriculture, we can see that unlocks city building. And then that unlocks road building. And then it looks like this one is in purple. It's probably quite hard to see. The UI, I have to blow it up a little bit and it's already quite small. But this one is Karimi Merchants and it is purple. That makes me think maybe that's a culture-based one, something like that. There must be significance to that one having a purple title versus the other ones that seem to have a generic like wooden look, or it goes gold and blue, I think, if you know it by the looks of it, from what we can see from this screenshot. But the purple one, and it being Karimi Merchants, makes me think that is going to be culture-based or tag-based, something along those lines. So this does give us our first look on how this system is going to work. And as I said, if you've played Hoi 4, Imperator Rome, you've seen a similar-ish version to that. And then as I was saying, 70% of all advances in a tree tend to be common to each country. Obviously, trade fairs, weaponsmith, guilds, organized religion, they are things that everyone is ultimately going to unlock. But the rest depend entirely on which country you are playing. Over 1/3 of the advances in the Age of Renaissance and Age of Discovery do not require any institutions to research either. So, as he did say, some of them are generic ones, if you want to think of it that way. Some are bound to institutions, and then there is also a bunch of other ones that aren't tied to the institutions and are going to be tied to other things instead of that. So it does look like, even if you're playing in a country that maybe hasn't had a DLC focused around it, if we think DLC is going to work the same way as it did in EU4, it looks like you are going to get a bit of variety here, depending on if you stay as the same religion, if you change your culture, something along those lines. It looks like you might get these different trees forming, and of course, the different ages that you go into, and if you get the institutions or not as well, which they're also going to talk about in a second. And then as you can see here, this is the tree that unlocks if you have meritocracy institution activated. You can see there's Imperial Ambitions, there's Abacus, there is Talented Traders. So again, this will unlock once you have that institution in your realm. So if you don't ever get that, you obviously won't get these. But as soon as you do get that, maybe you want to switch and pick up these bonuses because they are focused more on that institution system. So again, this is a cool way you can kind of specialize your realm, especially if you're playing as the same one constantly. You can go down one institution maybe a little bit earlier if you can, or maybe try focus on something else, or maybe do one where you don't focus them at all, and you just choose the more generic ones or culture-specific ones that you will have as well. And then as they mentioned at the beginning, they have taken things from the National Idea system in EU4 and adapted them into advances. Some of them didn't make sense and were lost. I think probably more the generic ones and ones that just don't make sense with these other new systems that we've got. But in general, the starting bonuses ended up as 2 Age of Tradition advances you start with already researched, and the rest is spread over the rest of the ages, with what was the finishing bonus as an advance in the Age of Revolution, so that's kind of showing how that has changed. In many cases, they have moved these to the appropriate time frame as well, so you're not going to get them in weird times where they didn't happen historically. So currently, many unique and powerful Swedish advances are in the Age of Absolutism, so there we go. Maybe Sweden isn't going to be as OP in this game. They've also heavily revised the names that we used before, and when they work on unique content for a country, they aim to add more advances as well. So that does tie into what I was saying earlier. It looks like you are going to get these, not generic ones at the start of the game when it launches. I'm sure many countries will have specific ones, but when we do get DLC in the future, we are going to get new additions here. It looks like country-based, or again, culture or religion-based, that you are then going to be choose if you have the DLC, I would think. And then they do actually show off one here that is Poland-specific. So this is Grosz Karakowski. Definitely butchered that name. I do apologize. And that gives tax efficiency plus 10%. And this is one of 16 unique to Poland advances. So you can already see, even in the base game when it comes out, we are going to get some specific versions of these to different countries as well, which is nice to see. We are just getting a general one, and then DLC is going to do that. It looks like in the base game, we are going to get a bunch, because this is 16 just for Poland. I know Poland, very exciting to play as, but there's obviously going to be all the other places on the map that are going to have content that I would think are more important than Poland. Don't leave angry comments, but you know what I mean. And then go back to advances that came from idea groups. Some of these ended up directly as advances unique for each type of country, like the Horde government ones were converted into unique advances for step hordes, and the divine ideas are unique advances for theocracies. So again, that's how they've pulled these in from EU4 systems, reworked them slightly, and added them into this advances system. However, most of the ideas ended up being sorted into administrative, diplomatic, and military, and we're going to get into why that is important in a second, with at least 10 in each category for each age, starting with the Age of Renaissance. So the earlier ages, you don't have this split. You will see now in Age of Renaissance and onwards, you are going to have a split based on those three. And why are there three? Well, that is at the start of each age, you will pick one focus, which will add those advances to your tree for that age. Now, you may think, why would anyone pick something else than military? You know, he is calling out that most people do play this as a map painter. First of all, there are different powerful benefits and tough choices you have to make. Let's look at the choices for the Age of Renaissance. Now, I will say, this wasn't called out in the dev diary, but it was called out in one of the very early answers Johan gave. The choice is important because you can't go down the other two. So if you unlock admin, you only have the admin ones. If you unlock diplomatic, you only have the diplomatic ones. If you choose military, you only have the military ones for that age. You can't go back and backfill the other ones. Now, he did say when you switch age to the next one, you get the choice again, so you can change it up, but you can't change it during the age you are in. So I like that. I know some people might not like that. They might want to pick up all of them. They might think, you know, why can't you do them all? I'm sure there'll be some mods that let you. And again, maybe there'll be a game option that allows you to do that. But I like this. I think it makes you kind of specialize your realm in a certain area. And as Johan says, picking the military one, yeah, that is probably going to be the best one for a military-focused campaign. But the other ones do give you good bonuses related to warfare as well. I'm sure they've thought about that and thought, well, most people play as a map painter. We can't just have military as the only good one because no one's ever going to pick the other ones. Now, let's look through them. So admin, that gives you better admin efficiency, lower interest, better proximity propagation, cheaper mercenaries, and much, much more. So as you can see, a spread across the different systems. Diplomatic, better merchants, more diplomatic reputation, march subjects. So maybe you can't get those if you don't go down the other trees. Cheaper war score costs and much more. And then military, obviously very military focused in a way. More prestige from battles, monthly tradition gain, and much, much more. So as you can see, these do change how you're going to play the game maybe. If you are playing a trade nation, you're going to go diplomatic. But maybe as you're getting through the ages, you are that trader, you've got your merchants, built up all your money. And then in later ages, you're thinking, well, now I'm going to expand and use that money to expand my realm. And then maybe in the later ages, you go down military or something like that. Or the other way around. Maybe you expand with military and then you get to one of the later ages and you think, do you know what? I'm going to switch to diplomatic, make people like me, get better merchants, and then I can make some money through the trade game later on. So I'm sure this will be one of the more contentious changes to the game, maybe, with how it kind of locks you off from certain options in each age. Again, this is age, so not across the whole game. You don't pick military at the start and you're always military. You can change it. You just can't change it within an age. You have to pick one and then you stay as it. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll see a change later on. Maybe there'll be a really high cost to change it mid-age or something like that. But I actually like this system. I think this is a cool change and I'm really interested to see how it plays out with these different nations. Again, one thing we've talked about a lot during the Tinto Talks, and when I'm talking about other games as well on the channel, I like these systems where you can play one country different ways. That was one of the problems I had with EU4. Well, it wasn't really a problem, but as we've discussed, it kind of pigeonholed you into playing certain countries in certain ways. It looks like from this, although I'm sure the bonuses are going to be very focused in historical things that those countries did, at least you can choose these different ways now, and that will give you some variability in your campaigns. Here is a screenshot of how it is going to look. So this is the Age of Renaissance, gives you a bit of a blurb about the age itself, and then you can see these different focuses across the bottom, and you will get told some of the laws here, and it looks like they are clickable, so you'll get a UI pop-up or something, and then you can read about what all of these do, and I'm sure when we first play the game, we're going to have to read these quite a bit and get used to what they do. But then you can decide here which one you want to pick this time round. I won't read through all of them, but as you can see, diplomatic has privateers, influence, tribute system. Admin has church attendance duty, debt and loans. Military focus has glorious arms, naval glory, marine regiments, anti-piracy leagues. So you can see how these are going to play differently depending on which one that you choose. At the start of each age, the trees populate with advances depending on what your country is at the time that this happens. So you'll only get relevant advances to choose from in that age. So there's two things about this. One, That means you won't see advances that you can't get. I would imagine until you unlock institutions, although maybe they show on there, but they're like grayed out. And then once you get the institution, they kind of get highlighted and you can choose for them. But this does mean you're not going to get literally every advance showing, even if there's no way for you to get them. And then the second thing, which they're going to talk about now, is if you switch tag or change religion or government form, and I'm sure there's other ones as well, this will be seen in the next age, not the age you are in. So if you have one of these and you're Catholic, and then you change to Protestant or a fully different religion, you don't actually see that in your choices until next age. Again, I'm sure some of you will think this is a good change, a bad change. I think this is a good change because I think it shows that when a realm changed religion or something, it wasn't like day one, it just happened. Because, you know, when King Henry changed England's religion, it didn't just happen like the day he said, I'm setting up a new church. It didn't just happen that day and the whole of the country changed over. It took time for that to happen. And I think this is a good way to show that as well. If you change your government, it is going to affect other parts of the game immediately, or like once a certain cooldown is finished, once you've fully implemented it. But in this system specifically, I think it is a good change where it does take time for that to come through, and it will be when you move into the next age. I imagine this might be as well to stop some gamification of it, because if it did reset it every time you changed, I'm sure you could kind of cheese it by picking good ones from one religion, switching to another one, picking up some cheap ones from that one, changing to another government form, doing the same thing there. So I imagine some of this is for balance, so you can't just keep changing your tag, religion, government, and picking good ones and then them just stacking on top of each other. So I do think that is probably the main reason for it working this way. But as I was saying, I think it does work historically with how long these systems took to kind of spread out. You wouldn't make a change and then it would immediately happen, as we've seen in other systems already in the game. The Advances tree for Age of Traditions is a bit unique in that it has many starting points and there are many countries, particularly in the New World, that do not start with them all. Metallurgy, agriculture, written alphabet, shipbuilding, and meritocracy are different start points who all have trees. Feudalism, which requires you to have embraced the institution to research, is in the agriculture tree and requires horse riding research first. So again, kind of talking us through how this is going to work. Legalism is part of the written alphabet tree and requires codified laws and the institution to spread to unlock their subtree. So yeah, you will see the trees even if you don't have the institution unlocked, and then you will be told, I guess, you need to have this to unlock this option. Many of these are more expensive to research. That does make sense as well, especially early game, where this is going to move a little bit slower, I would think. This, together with lots of unique advances in the first 3 ages, provides an interesting progress as a new world or similar type of country outside of the Eurasian core. So they have thought about that. That was one of the questions that came up last week with how those systems were going to work. Like, how does it play if you're not having institutions early on, if you're playing in the New World or outside of Eurasia? And this is explaining what Johan said last week, that there are other systems that enable you to progress outside of the institution and aid system, really. And this was that system. So it is good to see that all 3 of these kind of combine together to mean that no matter where you're playing, you are going to be able to make progress and catch up as well. They will talk about a catch-up mechanic as well. Each advance has a research cost that is the same for almost all advances. There are a few keystone advances, such as written alphabet, that do cost more, as they mentioned before. Every country generates research every month, and that is paid directly into the advance that you are currently researching. While a bit unrealistic, but good from a quality of life perspective, you can store up a year's worth of research without having an advance being researched. That is a good quality of life decision. I would think that's going to be because you might be really close to unlocking an institution and wanting to pick up their first advance. And it is kind of cool that there is going to be that slight buffer where if you think, oh, I'm going to get this institution in like 2 months, you're not locked into picking another advance, having that one finish, and then being able to go to the institution advance. It is good they've built this in. Yes, it is unrealistic, but it is a good quality of life change where you can kind of have a little bit of a buffer before you do make that choice. There'll be many examples, I'm sure, where that little bit of a buffer is going to be very useful before you have to make that next choice. I would think maybe after 12 months, it just doesn't increase the pot, or maybe it forces you to choose one. But I guess it's the same outcome, really, because if you're not building up more research, you are at that point just wasting it, so you will choose one at that point. There is also a sort of catch-up mechanic where advances from an earlier age are cheaper than the current age. As I was saying, they were going to cover that. That is going to allow countries outside of the Eurasian core to catch up, not like really quickly, but it is going to be a way for you to catch up and kind of have an opportunity mid and late game to catch up and maybe go past other nations as well. It's going to be very hard, especially if you play as these tiny nations places, but it is good that there is a sort of catch-up mechanic where you can get these cheaper. So it's not like you get them for free. It is going to cost you more, and you are an age behind. So it's not like you're catching up very, very quickly, but it is a way for you to do that. The amount of research you do depends on the type of country you are, if you're a settled country or still a nomadic group of pops, and on the power of your language as well. The satisfaction of the clergy state and the average literacy of your country also impacts how quickly you can research. So this is just like how much actual research you get, and there is a tooltip here. So settled country gets +1 research, power of language 0.18, average literacy +12%, clergy estate satisfaction +2% basically. So literacy being the massive difference here. And they did talk about this in one of the earlier dev diaries, about how literacy affects many things. The main effect it looks like is research, but they did also cover, in case you missed it during the trade one, that your population is more savvy around cost of items and things like that. If they have high literacy and you're making them pay more than other countries, they will get more upset about that. If they're a little bit dum-dums and they don't have good literacy, they don't understand that local places are paying less than you're charging them. So it can be, good to have a less literate nation in some campaigns. But if you are trying to just rush these researches, you are going to want to have a high literacy, a high clergy estate satisfaction, and your language as well takes effect by the looks of it. And if all of this sounds very complicated, if you're new to Europa Universalis or you're just kind of off the wagon, you're going to come back to EU5 and you're thinking, wow, all this research seems very confusing. I don't know how I'm going to choose them in my first couple of campaigns. Well, fear not. You can fully automate research and let the AI keep researching for you. So you can just leave it to one side. The AI will just choose things that it would probably choose if you weren't controlling the country. That's not going to be optimal. But again, if you're new to the game or even in your first few campaigns and you're thinking there's a lot of new systems here, I kind of want to concentrate on other things. I'll worry about institutions and ages, and maybe I'm really into warfare. You could just let the AI choose them for you. I don't think it's that much work to keep track of it yourself, but again, it is cool they've put this option in here so you can just let this be automated. And then he does mention here the research queue that we presumed from the first screenshot. So you can just select the text that you want, even the end ones, and then it will just pick all the prerequisites in that queue as well. So you could just do that at the beginning of an age technically, and then it will just do them all unless you go back in there and change it. So again, a pretty cool way for that to work. I do like all of these quality of life things they've thought about already, where you could just set and forget, or you could just forget about it entirely, or you can go in there and mess around with it, as I'm sure many of us will. But these other options are great for other people. And with that, that is the end of the dev diary for this week. So let me know what you think about advances. I think it looks pretty cool, coupled with the institutions, ages, these other systems, some of them that we haven't really seen much about yet, like the societal value system, which we haven't really seen much about. But as you can see, like all of these different systems combined are going to allow you, I think, to specialize your realms to a pretty good degree and should make playthroughs that little bit more varied, I think, especially with how you have to select the certain ones each age. Obviously, the AI is going to do that as well. So it is going to change, I think, how certain countries do play out whilst you're playing through the campaigns. But with that, they do say here that next week, a very, very good one, they're going to be covering the fun and joy of exploration. So they did mention, I think it was last week, that colonization dev diary is in August or September. I can't remember off the top of my head. But next week, we are going to get how exploration is going to work. So I guess that's how the fog of war is going to work and how you're going to be able to explore around the map with your ships, discover the new world, but then not how actual colonization works. But anyway, that one is one I've been really excited for. So that should be a fantastic one next week. But with that, hit that like button if you've enjoyed it today. Subscribe if you are new here. I'm covering Project Caesar, aka EU5, up to official announcement, launch, and beyond. And I cover Crusader Kings 3 in a very similar style. So if you've liked this, you play Crusader Kings, or you want to get into it, do follow the channel. I've got plenty more videos coming. But we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you in the next one.